I remember the night so vividly, though I wish I didn't. The mountain pass was shrouded in fog, the kind that swallows sound and softens the edges of the world. My headlights flickered as I crawled along the narrow road, the tires crunching on loose gravel that seemed to echo too loudly in the cold silence. Somewhere ahead, a pale light hovered, unmoving, suspended above the trees. It pulsed softly like it was breathing. I slowed, heart catching in my chest, trying to convince myself it was just a reflection, or a plane maybe. But the silence was wrong. No hum of engines, no wings slicing through the night. Just fog, just shadows, and that light, watching. I remembered stories my grandfather told me. Stories of travelers vanishing here, leaving nothing but empty campsites and strange marks etched into the rocks. I told myself not to look, but my curiosity forced my eyes upward. That's when I saw it. It was late September. The air had that dry, heavy chill that hides between the trees when summer ends. I remember the crunch of pine needles under my boots, and how they stopped crunching. The forest went still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I paused. Halfway up the ridge trail, the one no one really takes after dusk. There was a weight in the air, like the world had tilted just slightly off its axis. Then I saw it, a light, hanging between the pines. It wasn't bright, not really, more like the dim pulse of something alive. Soft, pale, almost silver, almost gold, flickering in slow, steady rhythms. It moved when I blinked, changed shape when I looked away. I thought maybe it was a drone or a lantern caught in a breeze. But there was no breeze. The branches were still. No rustle, no hum of insects. Just the soft ringing inside my ears, like the quiet before a storm. I took a step closer. The light drifted higher. Not fast, just enough to make me follow. My breath fogged in front of me. Each exhale looked like smoke. Each inhale felt too loud. I could see the pines leaning inward, their trunks stretching like ribs around a heartbeat. The light pulsed again. Slower this time, as if it knew I was watching. A single bird called out. Then silence folded back over it, like it had never existed. I remember the air tasting metallic, like rain that never fell, like static before a screen goes dark. When I blinked again, the light wasn't one shape anymore. It had edges, soft but wrong, like something behind glass, reaching through the reflection. My fingers tingled. I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from the way the air seemed to hum beneath my skin. I whispered, "Hello?" But my voice didn't sound right. It was swallowed. Before it reached the trees, the light tilted. It didn't move toward me. It leaned. As if it were listening back, I took another step. The forest floor sank beneath my boots. The pine needles gave way to damp earth, and the smell changed. From wood and sap to something faintly sweet, almost like ozone, almost like rot. My chest tightened. I should have turned back, but the light, it pulsed again. Slow, steady, a heartbeat in the dark. Every flicker brushed against the inside of my eyes. I could feel it more than see it. Then, it moved. Not up, not away, just slightly to the side, like it wanted me to follow. I did. The pines thinned as I walked. Each trunk seemed taller, sharper at the edges, as though I were shrinking between them. The silence stretched long and brittle, and I could hear my own pulse, not in my chest, but behind my teeth. When I looked up again, the light was closer. No sound, no shadow beneath it, just hovering. I reached out my hand, and for a moment, it pulsed faster. 3 quick flickers, like breath caught mid-step. Then one slow fade. A soft warmth brushed my fingers, but the air was freezing. And then, it was gone. The space it had filled seemed too empty, like the forest had exhaled all at once. Wind returned, faint at first. The branches shivered. Leaves rustled high above me. The silence broke, but not the stillness inside my chest. I stood there until my breath evened out, until the world felt real again. Then I saw it, a clearing just ahead. Open, quiet, bathed in a pale glow from the half-hidden moon. I stepped into it. and everything felt lighter. The air, my body, the weight that had pressed against me was gone. No light in the sky. No shape between the trees, just me, and the slow rhythm of the forest waking back up. Crickets, a distant owl, the soft sigh of the wind, but still. When I closed my eyes, I could see it. That flickering pulse, hovering in the dark behind my eyelids, changing shape, waiting, like something that hadn't really left. I stood in the clearing for a long time, just breathing, trying not to look back because the pines behind me, they still felt wrong, and somewhere high above them, beyond what my eyes could see, I swear I felt a faint, steady glow, flickering, like a heartbeat. Somewhere deep in the night, and it was listening. It was late evening, when the last streak of sunlight slipped behind the ridge. The trail was narrow, cut through gray stone and patches of dry grass. I'd ridden this mountain path dozens of times. But that night, the air felt heavier, cool, still, like the world was waiting for something. My tires whispered over gravel, kicking small stones that vanished into the drop below. The cliffs swallowed every sound. Even my breathing came back to me in pieces, short, uneven, like it didn't belong to me. I kept pedaling. The mist was rising from the lower pass, slow and white, like smoke curling from an invisible fire. It wrapped around the trail, soft, but too thick to see beyond a few feet. The forest below was gone, the valley gone, only pale air and rock. I remember how quiet it was. No crickets, no wind brushing the grass, just my heartbeat, steady, muffled, and the faint rattle of the bike chain. Then, a voice. It came from somewhere along the cliff face. Faint, drawn out, my name. I stopped. The front tire turned slightly, crunching over the edge of loose shale. The voice faded. And then, it came again. Closer, the exact same tone, the exact same breath between syllables, like someone repeating a recording of me, but slower. I whispered, "Hello?" My voice scattered against the rocks and returned, but not the way it should have. It came back broken. Split apart, my name again, but stretched like something pulled through static. I turned off my bike light. For a moment, the world went black. The mist glowed faintly without it, pale gray, alive with movement. Each swirl looked like it was hiding a figure, but when I blinked, there was nothing. I started riding again, slow, careful. The echo followed. Every time the tires rolled over a stone, I'd hear the same small crunch a heartbeat later. From somewhere behind me, I stopped. So did it. I leaned forward, listening. Silence, just the hiss of my own breath. Then, one soft step. Behind me, too close, the mist shifted. Something moved inside it. Not shape, not shadow, just motion, like a thought forming behind glass. I turned quickly, and the world tilted. The cliff edge was right there, barely a meter away. If I'd taken one more step, the air pressed colder against my skin. My arms were covered in goose flesh. I could smell the iron of the rocks, the faint sweetness of pine far below and under it. Something damp, like soil that hadn't seen sun in years. My name drifted out again. Quieter now, almost gentle. I whispered it back without meaning to. It repeated, each time softer. Each time closer, I got back on the bike, pedaled faster. The mist chased the trail ahead of me, flowing around my wheels, curling into the air like breath. And still, I could hear it. Footsteps that weren't mine, moving in rhythm, each push of the pedal, each crunch of gravel, matched by another just behind. I didn't dare look back. The path began to widen, opening toward the service road that cut through the mountains. I could see the faint shimmer of asphalt through the haze. The echoes faded with distance. The cliffs swallowed my name one last time and gave nothing back. By the time I reached the road, the mist had thinned. The trees reappeared. The world looked normal again. Almost. I stopped beside the wooden guardrail, breathing hard. Everything was still. The bike frame ticked as it cooled. The air smelled of dust and pine sap. Then I heard it again, a faint scuff. Behind me, not echo, not delayed, a step, real. I turned. The trail was empty, but the gravel beside my tire shifted, just once, as though something unseen had stepped onto the road and stood there with me. The silence after was complete. No wind, no movement, just that sense, that pull, that quiet certainty that something had followed. I waited until the sky turned the color of slate. Then I rode home, slowly, never once turning back. But even now, when I think of that pass, I hear it, my name, folded inside the fog, echoing softly against the cliffs, like it's still waiting for me to answer. We camped near the lake that night. Late autumn, the kind of cold that makes your breath shimmer before fading into the dark. The trees were thin, tall enough to hide the stars between their spines. The fire was small, burning soft and low, throwing orange light over the tent's edge. I remember the smell of wood smoke, and how the air felt too still. No frogs, no crickets. Just the slow pop of embers and the lake breathing somewhere beyond the trees. We fell asleep like that, half wrapped in blankets, faces warm, backs cold. When I woke, everything was quiet. No glow from the fire. No warmth. Only the faintest gray light brushing the ground. At first, I thought it was early morning, but the stars were still there, sharp and motionless above the clearing. I sat up. The ashes were damp. Not scattered, not burned out, just wet, as if someone had poured water over them. The air smelled wrong. Not smoke, not pine. Something faintly metallic, like rain that hadn't fallen. She stirred beside me, whispering something half asleep. I didn't answer. I was looking at our packs. They weren't where we left them. The lantern, the stove, the folded chairs, all there but turned slightly. Moved just enough to notice. As though someone had touched everything and set it back down carefully, I stood. The earth was soft under my socks, damp with dew or something heavier. Every step I took sounded too close, too clear. The trees looked different, too. Their shadows were stretched wrong. Longer. Sharper, like the fire was still burning. But the light had gone cold. I turned slowly, watching the black between the trunks shift, and that's when I saw it. Something moving. Not fast. Not even walking. Just swaying slightly like a person trying to find balance in the dark. At first, I thought it was another camper. Someone lost. Someone looking for the road. But the longer I looked, the less it looked human. Its shape seemed to breathe. Stretching. Shrinking. As though the shadows around it were alive too. I blinked. And it was gone. Just the trees again. Just the whisper of leaves brushing each other high above. I took a step back, then another. My heartbeat felt strange, not fast, just too loud, like it was echoing through my chest instead of inside it. Behind me, the tent rustled. She called my name softly, asking what was wrong. I didn't answer. Because I could see it again, closer this time. Not shape exactly. More like the space where shape should be. An outline carved from the dark itself. 2 small points glowed where its face might have been. Not bright, not like eyes, more like the last light inside a dying ember. It didn't move toward me. It just stood there, watching. I felt the cold crawl up my arms, like my blood was turning to mist. I whispered her name quietly. And when she looked up, it was gone again. Only the forest remained, only silence. We packed before sunrise. Didn't speak much. Every sound, the zipper, the clink of metal, the flap of the tent, seemed too sharp, as though it might wake something. When we stepped into the clearing, the ground looked wrong. Our footprints from last night were gone. Even the fire pit had shifted. Not destroyed, not scattered, just moved several feet to the left. Perfectly intact, like the entire camp had been lifted and set down somewhere else. She thought maybe we'd been half asleep, that we'd imagined it. But when we looked back from the trail, the clearing didn't look like ours at all. The trees were different, closer together. The lake was further away. It felt like we'd camped somewhere else entirely, a place that only existed for that one night. We didn't talk on the drive home. The silence followed us, pressed against the car windows, heavy and patient. That night, I unpacked our things: the stove, the lantern, the folded chairs, each one smelled faintly of wet ash, and the canvas bag, the one I could have sworn I zipped shut, was open. Inside was a handful of dirt, cold, black, damp to the touch. I threw it out. But when I closed my eyes later, I could still feel it under my nails. That cool, living weight of earth, like something had buried its hands in our camp. And then put everything carefully back. I still go hiking sometimes, but never overnight, and never near the lake, because every time dusk falls and the air goes still, I see that glow again, 2 faint points, hanging between the trees, watching, waiting, as if the forest remembers where we slept. It was somewhere past midnight, early winter, the kind of cold that seeps through glass and hums against your teeth. I was hauling freight across the northern ridge route, an old 2-lane road that twists through miles of fog and pine. The radio had gone quiet an hour back, no signal, just a low hiss that came and went with every turn. The world outside was pale, empty, headlights cutting through fog like dull blades. Every curve looked the same: wet asphalt, ghost-white trees, and the faint outline of cliffs fading into nothing. I'd been driving that stretch for years. But that night it felt different, heavier somehow, like the air itself didn't want to move. The wipers dragged slow across the windshield, leaving faint streaks that caught the light. Somewhere behind the fog, a ridge rose above the road, steep, jagged, hidden by drifting mist. That's when I saw them, 2 pale lights. High up, perfectly still, not headlights, not stars. Just 2 small orbs glowing from the ridge line, far enough away to seem unreal, close enough to make my chest tighten. I slowed down. The engine hummed lower. The tires whispered against the wet road. The lights didn't move. Didn't fade. Just hovered there, white, cold, steady as breath. At first I thought they were eyes. Then I told myself they couldn't be. Too wide apart, too level. But the longer I stared, the more that thought refused to leave. They blinked, both at once. A single, slow closing. Then open again. My hands tightened on the wheel. The fog swallowed the ridge in the next second, and the lights were gone. The world went flat again. Just road and mist and the quiet hum of the truck. But something had shifted. The silence wasn't the same anymore. It felt watched, like the fog wasn't fog at all, but breath. Breathing in. Breathing out. I checked the mirrors. The rear view was empty. Side mirrors, too. Only the beam of my own headlights reflecting off the haze behind me. I looked again and realized something. The reflection was wrong. No glare. No glint of wet asphalt trailing behind the truck. Just nothing, as if the mirrors had turned blind. I reached up, tilting one slightly. The glass showed the road, but no light touched it. Like the world behind me had gone dark. I pressed harder on the gas. The hum of the engine deepened, but the air inside the cab stayed still. My breath fogged faintly in front of me, though the heater was running. I could feel something crawling behind that stillness, a weight I couldn't name. Every few miles, the fog thinned just enough to show the ridge again. And every time I expected to see those eyes. Sometimes I thought I did. A flicker of white between the trees. A flash reflected off stone. Each time, I blinked, and it was gone. The road wound lower into the valley. The fog followed. It clung to the mirrors, soft and heavy, like it didn't want to let go. By the time I reached the rest stop at the base of the mountain, my hands were shaking. Not from cold, from the quiet. I parked beneath the single yellow light outside the diner. The kind that buzzes weakly in the cold. No other trucks, no people. Just the soft hum of the light and the sound of distant wind threading through the trees. When I got out, the air hit me, damp, sharp, metallic. I looked back up at the ridge. Nothing there. Just black against the gray sky. Still, I couldn't shake it. That feeling, as if something up there was still looking down. I walked to the diner door but stopped halfway. There, in the side mirror of my truck, a faint shape reflected in the glass. Two pale spots barely visible. Like eyes half hidden behind fog. They blinked. Then the mirror went dark again. I didn't move for a long time. Just stood there, watching my own reflection fade. When I finally went inside, the air smelled like old coffee and rain. I sat by the window, hands still trembling, eyes on the mountain road. Nothing followed me down. No lights, no movement. But for the rest of the night, every time I looked at the glass, I could feel it. That quiet pressure. That unseen stare, like the fog itself had eyes, and they never stopped blinking. It was early morning, late October. The forest still wet from last night's rain. I'd been on patrol since dawn, checking the lower trails near the ravine. The kind of fog that sits low to the ground had rolled in before sunrise. Thick, pale, moving like breath. Every step I took sank into soft earth. The air was cold enough to sting, and everything smelled like damp moss and pine sap. For a while, it was quiet. Just the slow creak of my pack and the steady rhythm of my boots. Then I heard it. A low hum. Barely there at first, like a vibration more than sound. It came from somewhere deeper in the trees. I stopped walking, and the world held still with me. The hum continued, steady, constant, almost calm. It reminded me of a power line or the deep tone that comes when wind passes through hollow wood. Except there were no power lines out there. No machines. Nothing but fog and forest. I started toward it. The trees grew denser as I went. Their trunks slick with moisture, leaning just slightly toward the sound. Branches overhead hung low, dripping quietly onto my shoulders. Each drop echoed louder than it should have. The hum got stronger. It wasn't loud, but it pressed against my chest, like standing too close to a speaker. I radioed in, asked if anyone was nearby. Static answered me. No voice, no feedback. Just a thin line of white noise, humming in sync with whatever was in the fog. I kept walking. The air felt thicker now, harder to breathe. The fog moved differently here, curling upward, pulling at the edges of the trees like invisible hands. The hum rose slightly in pitch, enough to make the hairs on my arms lift. I reached a narrow clearing. It didn't look natural. The ground was smooth, flattened, as if something heavy had been resting there. The trees around it bent inward, their trunks arched just enough to look wrong. The hum circled the space, not from one direction anymore, but all around. Vibrating softly beneath my boots, I crouched, pressed my palm to the soil. It was warm, too warm, and then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, measured, moving just beyond the fog line. I stood quickly. Called out. No answer. The steps stopped. Then started again, this time behind me. I turned, but there was nothing. Only the pale haze and the faint shimmer of moisture drifting through it. The hum grew sharper, higher. Almost like it was trying to speak. Each tone felt layered, like 100 quiet voices humming the same note just out of sync. My chest tightened. The radio buzzed once, a burst of static so quick it almost felt like breath. Then silence, complete silence. No hum, no footsteps, no dripping branches, just air. Heavy, still. The fog seemed thicker after that, darker almost. I couldn't tell which way I'd come from anymore. Every tree looked the same. Every shadow curved in the same direction. I tried walking back the way I thought I came. The ground crunched beneath me, not leaves, not twigs. Something softer. It took me a few seconds to realize it was frost, forming even as I stepped. A thin layer spreading outward in delicate lines, tracing each footprint before disappearing again. Then the hum returned, low at first. Far away, then closer, filling the space around me like water filling a glass. I stopped walking. The hum stopped too. When I breathed, it echoed. When I blinked, it felt like the air pulsed in time with it. Every sound, every movement, mirrored back to me a half-second later. as if the forest itself was breathing along. I whispered, "Is someone there?" The hum responded. One slow, rising note, then gone. That was the last thing before the quiet came back. The fog started to thin not long after. I don't remember walking out. Only the moment the air shifted. When I could see the road again through the trees, the hum didn't follow me. But the silence did. Even now, when the wind moves through the station windows at night, I hear it. That low vibration, soft, patient, waiting somewhere between sound and breath. Sometimes it fades before I notice. Sometimes it stays longer, and once, just once, the trees outside bent slightly toward the sound, the same way they did that morning, as if they still remember it, and maybe. It remembers me too. It was the morning after the storm. Late winter. The air sharp enough to sting when I breathed. The world felt hushed, blanketed under a perfect layer of white. Snow sat heavy on the trees, bending their branches into quiet arches. Every step I took broke the silence. Crunch, pause, breath. I'd hiked that trail a dozen times before. I knew its turns, its fallen logs, the little clearing that always caught the first light. But that morning, it felt different, like the forest was holding its breath with me. The path wound upward toward the ridge. My boots left a clean trail behind, each print dark, sharp-edged against untouched snow. Halfway up, I stopped to adjust my pack. When I turned back, there were more footprints. Beside mine, deep, perfectly shaped, human. They matched my pace exactly, step for step, as if someone had walked with me the whole way. But I hadn't seen anyone. Hadn't heard a single branch move. The forest was still, too still. I crouched down, brushed my glove along the edge of one. It was fresh, crisp, no frost crusting the edges. Whoever made them was close. I straightened, scanning the tree line. Nothing but fog rising from the ground, thin as breath. For a moment, I told myself maybe I'd doubled back somehow, that the storm had twisted my sense of direction. But the tracks weren't mine. I could see the difference. My left boot had a worn tread on the heel. These didn't. They were too clean, too deliberate. I started walking again, slowly now, watching how the prints moved beside mine. They never wavered, never changed pace. Even when I stepped over roots, they followed the same rhythm, like an echo that knew my next move. I felt heat rise under my coat. Though the air was freezing, every sound felt too close. The crunch of snow beneath me, the whisper of wind slipping between branches, the faint, steady thud of my heart, and always, those prints beside mine. We reached the frozen pond near the ridge. The trees opened into a wide, white basin. The surface of the water was glassy, reflecting pale light from a sun hidden behind clouds. The footprints led right up to the edge, and stopped. No turn. No return path, just gone. It looked like whoever had walked there had stepped forward and disappeared. I stood there staring at the last print. It was deeper than the others, pressed down as if with weight. Then nothing. Not even a scuff. The snow around it untouched. Perfect, silent. I felt something shift in the air. A change in pressure, like the world had leaned closer. I waited, listening. There was only the faint hum of wind sliding across the frozen pond. And then, beneath that, something else. A soft crack. Like ice straining under breath, I stepped back, watched a line form under the surface. Thin, delicate, moving toward me. It stopped before reaching the shore. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, maybe more. The fog began to move again, rolling low across the pond, covering the ice in a pale, breathing layer. When it cleared, the line was gone, and so were the footprints, all of them. Mine too. The entire trail behind me, wiped clean. Smooth as untouched snow, only the stillness remained. I remember the way the cold settled then. Not the kind that bites your skin, but the kind that sinks deep, into your chest, into your thoughts. I backed away from the pond, eyes on the place where the prints had ended, and I swear for just a moment, I saw a shape in the reflection, something standing where the footprints stopped, pale, still, watching me from beneath the ice. But when I blinked, it was gone. I left the mountain without looking back. The snow kept falling behind me, softly erasing everything I had touched. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still feel that quiet pressure beside me, the weight of footsteps that matched mine. They never felt threatening. Just there, like something had followed me because it didn't want to be alone. And maybe it isn't, because last week, after another storm, I went walking again. Fresh snow, empty woods, and halfway up the ridge, I stopped. Beside my new prints, a second trail appeared, perfectly human, perfectly still, waiting. The fog came down without warning, thick, white, swallowing the road ahead. I'd been driving for hours, alone through the mountain pass, trying to beat the storm that was meant to hit by nightfall. But the road blurred into itself. The world shrank to the faint circle of my headlights. Every curve felt endless. I slowed to a crawl, the tires whispering against damp gravel. That's when I saw it. A light, soft and warm, barely glowing through the mist. It flickered, then steadied as if waiting for me to notice. A cabin, small, wooden, half hidden among the trees. Smoke rising from a crooked chimney, curling into the pale fog like breath. Relief hit me first. Then a quiet unease. There were no other signs of life for miles. No turnoff, no mailboxes. Just that faint golden glow sitting in the white silence. Still, I parked the car and stepped out. The air was cold enough to bite. Each breath came out in soft plumes, and the fog felt thick, like it pressed gently against my face. I followed a narrow path toward the cabin. The snow there was untouched. Not even a footprint. When I reached the porch, the boards creaked under my boots. The door was slightly open. Warm air drifted out, sweet like pine and old wood. Inside, everything looked lived in. A fire hummed quietly in the stone hearth. 2 chairs sat beside it, angled toward each other as if mid-conversation. The table was set for 4. Plates, cups, silverware, all spotless. All waiting. A pot rested on the stove, still warm when I touched it. Steam faintly lifted from the rim. Someone had been here. Maybe just moments ago. Hello? I called out. My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. Nothing answered. Only the faint rustle of the fire. I waited a long moment, listening, breathing. Then I walked further in. There were coats on hooks by the door, boots lined neatly against the wall. But the dust on the floor hadn't been disturbed. No footprints. No marks at all. The lamps along the walls flickered, one by one, as if following me with a slow blink. Something about the light felt wrong. Too steady, too patient. In the corner, I noticed a framed picture. A family. 4 faces blurred slightly under glass, as if the image had melted over time. The woman in the picture had her hand on a child's shoulder. Her smile was faint, but her eyes, they looked sharp, alive. The longer I stared, the more it felt like her gaze tilted, following mine. I stepped back. The floor gave a low groan beneath me, like something shifting in the boards. A door at the end of the hall closed softly. Not slammed. Just pressed shut. The fire crackled once, then dimmed. The air grew colder. I turned to leave, the way I came in. But the fog outside had thickened. Through the window, I could barely see my car's headlights. Just a faint blur of white and shadow. Still, I opened the door. The cold hit like water. I stepped onto the porch and froze. Behind me, through the open doorway, the cabin lights blinked, slowly, like breathing. Then they went out, all at once. The porch beneath me felt weightless, the air too quiet. When I turned around, there was nothing, no door. No walls, no cabin, just fog, and trees bending under the weight of silence. The place I had stepped out from, gone, as if it had never been there. I stood there for a long time. The ground where the porch had been was bare earth, cold and damp. Even my footprints from before had vanished. Only one faint shape remained in the snow, a ring of melted frost, as if something warm had once sat there. I walked back toward the road, heart quiet but heavy. My car waited where I'd left it, headlights dim against the mist. When I looked back one last time, I thought I saw a flicker in the distance, a single pale light, deep between the trees. It blinked once, then faded. The drive down the mountain was slower than before. The fog followed me, clinging to the windows, trailing behind in the rear view like smoke. And even now, I can still smell the pine, still feel that faint warmth on my palms from the fire that shouldn't have been burning. Sometimes, when the world goes quiet, I catch it again, that same flicker of gold on the edge of the dark. And for a moment, I think the cabin is still there, waiting. The fire was small that night, just enough to keep the cold back. We'd been hiking since morning, 4 of us, and by dusk the woods felt endless. Dark between the trunks, quiet in a way that pressed against your chest. No wind, no insects, just that slow crackle of the fire and the faint hiss when the logs shifted. I remember staring at the light, the way it reached into the dark, flickering gold across the branches. That's when I saw it. A shape, moving, behind the glow, not one of us, not an animal. Just a tall, thin shadow sliding along the trees. It moved when the fire moved, but not with it, almost like it had its own rhythm. Its own breath. I blinked. It stopped, and then there were more. 3, maybe 4 of them, stretching long against the bark, flickering in and out of the light like the air itself was breaking. "Do you see that?" someone whispered, but the others just leaned forward, squinting into the dark. Nothing moved. Only the faint orange shimmer of heat rising off the coals. We told ourselves it was smoke, or tired eyes, but none of us spoke again for a while. The woods had gone still, every breath sounded too loud. Every shift in the fire felt wrong. I could feel the heat on my face, but the cold on my back. As if something stood just behind me. Close enough to touch. I turned slowly. Only trees, pale trunks, empty spaces between them that seemed deeper than before. And in one of those spaces, a shape. Black against black. Too tall, too narrow. It didn't move, didn't breathe. Just was. The fire popped, and in that blink, it was gone. I told myself I'd imagined it, that the woods were playing tricks. But when I sat back down, the others were staring into the same spot. The air felt charged, like static before lightning. Something shifted in the leaves, a faint rustling, slow, measured, then a whisper. Not words, not really, just the shape of them, like the forest was breathing through teeth. I leaned forward, trying to listen. The whisper came again, closer this time. It brushed my ear so soft it felt like thought instead of sound. Go, just that. One word, faded as soon as it came. I froze. Didn't answer. Didn't move. Across the fire, someone's head turned sharply, as if they'd heard it too. But no one spoke. No one wanted to break the stillness. The firelight bent strange then. It stretched across the dirt, casting long shapes. Ours and something else. Something that didn't belong to any of us. The shadows on the ground were wrong. They wavered, disconnected from our movements. One of them shifted, slowly standing upright, pulling itself away from the dirt like peeling film. And then it was gone again, snapped back into the dark. The fire dimmed. For a moment, everything turned gray. The trees, the smoke, our faces, all drained of color. The air hummed, low and uneven, like breath through a broken reed. Someone whispered, "We should go." We didn't argue. We doused the fire, watched the smoke rise into the cold night. As the last ember faded, I looked one more time into the trees. Nothing moved. No wind. No whisper. But I could still see the outline of where one of those shapes had stood. the darkness there just a shade deeper than the rest. We walked back toward the trail, our flashlights trembling over roots and stones. Each beam felt too narrow, too small, and sometimes, when one of us turned, the shadows behind the others lagged a little, as if following a moment late. We didn't talk until we reached the road. The woods behind us stayed silent. Only the faint rustle of leaves in the distance, like something exhaling, relieved to see us go. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still feel the warmth of that fire, and the cold. Just beyond it, the place where the light ends, where something else begins. And if I listen long enough, I swear I can still hear it, that same whisper. Faint, patient, calling from between the trees. The trail twisted through the mountain like a scar, narrow, uneven, the kind of path that disappears if you look away too long. It was late afternoon when I started climbing. The air thin, dry, every breath carrying that faint taste of metal and stone. I'd hiked this pass before, but the place felt different this time. Too still. Even the birds had gone quiet. The only sound was gravel shifting beneath my boots and the slow hum of wind between the cliffs. For a while, that was enough. Just silence. Just the rhythm of walking. Then I heard it, my name, soft, drawn out, carried by the air like a sigh. I stopped, listened. The sound faded into the rocks above me. It had come from the left wall of the pass, a wide slab of gray stone streaked with moss. At first I thought I'd imagined it, wind bending in strange ways, an echo from somewhere else. But then I saw it. Letters, shallow and crooked, etched into the surface, my name. I ran my fingers over the grooves. Fresh, too sharp for age. The stone felt warm. I backed away, looked around. Nothing but the empty trail behind me, stretching down into the haze. The cliffs loomed close, their faces rough and pitted, like hundreds of mouths frozen mid-whisper. I walked on. Slower now. The air felt heavier, thick with dust and faint vibration, like something just under the surface was moving. A few minutes later it came again. My name. Quieter this time, but closer. It rolled along the rock walls, echoing back and forth until it sounded like dozens of voices, each one carrying the same breath, the same shape. I turned in a slow circle, trying to find where it started. The mountains just stared back, gray and endless. Then I saw new markings, higher up, carved into the stone like veins of black script. Each curve and angle caught the fading light, lines running deeper than they should. They weren't just on one side now. Both cliffs had them. My name, repeated again and again, some backwards, some split apart, as if the rock itself was trying to learn how to speak it. The air buzzed faintly. The wind had stopped. When I exhaled, my breath hung motionless in front of me. That's when the echo changed. No longer a whisper. It sounded aware. Every time I moved, it followed. Every step returned twice. One from my boots, one from something unseen, and beneath it all, a low hum, deep, steady, almost like the mountain had a pulse. I pressed my palm to the rock again. The vibration was real. Small tremors rolled through the surface like breathing. I pulled back. My fingers were dusted with fine black powder, ash or soot. It smelled faintly of copper. The sun had dipped low by then. The trail was dim, washed in that pale, dying gold that lasts only minutes. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and for a heartbeat, they didn't line up. Mine pointed one way. The others pointed back. The hum grew louder, pressing against my ears until it became a whisper again. Not words this time, just sound, looping in and out of itself. Then, clear as a thought, my name again, but closer. Inside the air around me. It came from the rocks ahead, and when I looked, I saw movement beneath the surface. Something shifting in the stone. Dark shapes, almost like faces, pushing against the walls from the inside. Mouths opened, silent, wide. The whisper turned sharp. a single breath that felt cold enough to sting. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing on the loose gravel. The sound stopped, just like that. The hum vanished. The air went flat. I stood there, alone between two walls of quiet gray. The markings were gone. The rock smooth again, as if nothing had ever been carved there. Only a faint echo lingered. Not from the cliffs this time, from somewhere deep inside them. It followed me all the way down the trail, fainter with each turn, but never gone, even at the base of the mountain. As the sky turned black and the wind picked up again, I could still feel the hum beneath my feet, a low pulse, waiting. And sometimes, when the world goes still enough, I still hear it, the way it said my name. Slow, careful, like the mountain was learning how to call me back. It was late autumn, the kind of cold that seeps through layers, quiet and silver beneath the moon. I'd hiked to the overlook before dusk, camera strapped to my chest, tripod digging into my shoulder. The valley below was a dark ocean of trees. No roads, no towns, just fog moving slow and heavy, curling through the pines like breath. The air smelled of rain and burnt leaves. Still. Too still. I remember setting the tripod down, checking my light meter and hearing nothing but the faint hum of wind across the ridge. Then, there was movement, a flicker, low in the valley where the fog thickened. At first I thought it was lightning, but it stayed. A soft, glowing sphere, hovering above the treetops. Then another, and another. They drifted together, slow and deliberate, as if following a pattern only they understood. My hands felt cold against the metal of the camera. The lens fogged for a second, then cleared. I adjusted the focus. The shutter clicked, one frame, then another. Then a full roll. The lights pulsed faintly with each exposure like they knew. The longer I watched, the more their rhythm changed. Two gliding close, one darting back, then all freezing midair, perfectly still. The fog shimmered around them, pale gold bleeding into white. It was beautiful. And wrong. The pattern looked human, almost like someone tracing shapes in the dark. A circle, a line, a pause, then everything stopped. All three lights turned, angled upward, as if they were staring back at me. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The air felt charged, tingling against my skin, the way it does before a storm. The next second, they vanished. No flash, no fade. Just gone. The valley dropped into darkness so complete it felt like sound had been pulled from the world. Only the faint click of the camera's rewind. The slow turning of gears. I packed up fast, my fingers trembling. The fog had climbed higher now, brushing the rocks beneath my boots. I walked back down the trail with my head low, feeling that strange pressure in the air follow me, all the way to the car. All the way home. When I developed the film that night, the room filled with the scent of chemicals and static warmth. I watched the images bloom in the tray, shadows and light swimming into focus. Frame by frame, the valley appeared. The fog, the lights, they looked softer on film, almost gentle, but there was something else. In the fifth exposure, one of the lights seemed stretched, a faint distortion inside the glow, like a ripple frozen mid-motion. In the sixth, the shape sharpened. It wasn't round anymore. It had edges, a curve like a shoulder, an arm. I leaned closer. The paper dripped onto the counter. The smell of developer clung to the air, sharp and sweet. The seventh photo made my throat tighten. Inside the light, a figure stood, not fully formed, but there. Head bowed, arms hanging at its sides. Its face was nothing but brightness, as if it had been carved out of the light itself. I blinked. Looked again. The edges of the image began to warp, a faint ripple spreading outward. Like water disturbed by a stone, it moved. The photo moved. I stepped back, nearly knocking over the tray. The paper twitched once, then lay still. I waited, heart beating slow and heavy. Nothing else changed, but I couldn't stop staring. Each print after that had the same shape, closer every time. In the final frame, The last one I'd taken before they vanished, the light filled the camera completely. No valley. No fog. Just a human outline, reaching forward, as if pressing against the lens. I didn't sleep that night. The house hummed around me. The refrigerator. The pipes. The faint click of cooling metal. All of it felt too alive. Just before dawn, I checked the negatives again. The final one was blank, not black. Not exposed, just clear, as if that last photo had burned itself away. When I looked out the window, the valley was still wrapped in fog. But there, just at the horizon, a single light floated above the trees, not moving, not pulsing, waiting. I watched until morning, until the sun washed it from view. But even now, when I close my eyes, I see it hovering there, pale and patient, like it knows I'm still looking. And sometimes, when I develop new film, no matter what I shoot, that same faint distortion appears, a glow, a figure, standing in the distance, as if it followed me home. It was late afternoon, the kind of light that feels thin, half fading, half holding on. The trail wound upward through cedar and pine, and the air was damp enough to taste. A cool mist clung to the sleeves of my jacket, soft, quiet, like the forest was exhaling against me. I'd been hiking for hours. No other footprints, no distant chatter of birds, just the hush of wind through the needles above. Then, the fog thickened. At first it was slow, a drifting veil that rolled between the trunks, catching the last pieces of light. But the higher I went, the closer it pressed. My breath came out in small clouds that vanished before they should have. The world turned pale. Like I was walking through someone's half-formed memory, I stopped, listened. Nothing. Even the forest had gone still. No insects. No rustling. Just that faint, dense quiet that makes your own heartbeat sound too loud. When I moved again, something moved with me. A shape. A ripple in the fog. It curved at the edge of my vision, then flattened, as if pretending to be part of the air. I took another step. It followed. Every motion I made came back to me a breath later, soft, delayed, like an echo that didn't need sound. I turned my head. The fog turned with it. Not all of it, just enough. My hands felt cold now, colder than the air deserved. I brushed my fingers against the damp bark of a tree, trying to ground myself. The bark was slick, its surface trembling faintly, like something had just touched it before me. I whispered, "Is someone there?" The words didn't carry. They folded into the mist and vanished. Then the fog leaned closer. It gathered slowly, as if listening. My skin prickled. The hairs on my arms lifted. Each exhale from my lips seemed to push against it. And each time, it pushed back. There was shape now. A vague outline suspended in the whiteness. Shoulders, arms, a tilt of the head that mirrored mine. I stepped left. It followed perfectly. I raised my hand. So did it. But when I lowered mine, it didn't move. It stayed that way. Arms still raised, frozen in midair. I felt a drop of moisture slide down my neck. Too heavy to be missed. Too deliberate. The silence deepened, becoming a kind of pressure in my chest. The forest wasn't breathing anymore. Even the wind had stopped. It was just me, and whatever had learned how to move like me. The fog pulsed once, a faint flicker through its form, like light caught behind skin. And then, it began to blur again. It didn't retreat, didn't fade. It shifted, spreading into new shapes. Not one, several, tall, thin silhouettes rising between the trees, where seconds ago there had been nothing. Each one leaned slightly forward, like they were listening too. I could feel the weight of their attention, not watching, but waiting. I tried to move, but the air around me felt thick, like wading through water. My own breath sounded foreign, trapped and uneven, and in that suffocating quiet something changed. A whisper, not from any direction I could name, more like it was threaded through the air itself. A single word. My name. I froze. The shapes didn't move, but I could feel them draw closer, as if the fog itself had leaned in to see how I'd react. I wanted to run, but running felt useless here. The path behind me had vanished into a wall of white, so I walked forward, slowly, carefully. Each step sent tiny ripples through the mist, and those shapes swayed with me, like shadows tied to my rhythm. When I finally reached the clearing, the fog stopped following. It hung just at the edge, dense and still, as though some invisible boundary held it back. The silence stretched. Then, one last whisper, soft, right beside my ear, a breath that wasn't mine. And then it was gone. The fog thinned, slowly peeling away from the trees. Sound returned in fragments, a branch creaking, a single crow calling somewhere high above, but the air still felt wrong, like the forest remembered something it shouldn't have heard. When I looked back one last time, the fog had settled low along the ground, curling over roots and stones, shifting faintly in the dim light, and for a second, I thought I saw it move again. Not toward me this time. Away, still in my shape, still walking, until it disappeared into the trees. It was late. Too late to still be driving. The dashboard clock blinked 1:47 a.m., its numbers dim through the soft hum of the heater. Outside, the world was gray and shapeless, a quiet ribbon of road winding through mist and pine. I remember thinking how empty it felt out there, how the trees seemed to lean inward as if trying to listen. I'd missed a turn somewhere before midnight. The GPS kept recalculating, its blue arrow spinning in circles, like even it had lost faith in direction. Each sign I passed was half swallowed by fog, and every mile marker looked the same. Black asphalt, white lines, the same leaning lamppost ahead, its light flickering like a heartbeat. I drove past it once. Then again, I told myself it was coincidence, a trick of fog, a loop in my tired mind. But the third time I saw it, the exact same bend, the same pale light swaying in the cold wind. I felt something shift inside me, like the air had grown thicker. The radio hissed softly under the static. A faint whisper between channels. I turned the volume down, but the hum didn't stop. It seemed to come from outside, low and steady, like the road itself was breathing. I slowed down, hoping for a turnout or a gas station, anything familiar. But the fog just deepened, curling against the headlights in strange, swirling shapes. The car's clock blinked again, 1:47 a.m. Still. No matter how far I drove, the time didn't change. I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles pale under the dashboard glow. I checked my phone. No signal, only the faint reflection of my own face in the dark screen. Eyes tired, unblinking, and behind me, for a moment, a faint blur in the back seat. I turned too quickly. The seat was empty, but the air there felt colder, like something had just been breathing in that space. I tried laughing. It came out thin, cracked. When I looked ahead again, the lamppost returned, its light flickered twice, then held steady, too steady. I passed it again, slower this time, watching it fade in the mirrors. But when I blinked, it was already ahead of me again. My chest tightened. I pressed the gas, the engine straining as the road began to tilt slightly upward. For a while, it felt like I was climbing out of it. The loop, the fog, the stillness. Then I saw it. The same sign. The same tree split at the trunk. The same pale light flickering in rhythm with my pulse. I slammed the brakes. The car slid slightly on the damp asphalt. Silence. The fog pressed in closer now, heavy and almost warm. My breath fogged the glass. Then, slowly, something began to move within it. Shapes. Shifting. Formless. Not quite human. Not quite not. They moved along the road just at the edges of the headlights, never touching the light itself. I could feel them watching. Waiting for me to move again, I whispered to myself, I just need to turn around. But when I did, the rearview mirror showed only endless road behind. No beginning, no end. Just another flickering lamppost. The mist outside pulsed like breath against the glass. I could almost hear something under it, a faint rhythm, like a voice repeating, too low to understand. The GPS blinked again, then froze. The screen flickered, and for one brief second, I thought I saw a figure standing there, reflected in the glass. Close, too close. I shut my eyes, counted 3 slow breaths. When I opened them again, the screen was blank. I started driving, not fast, just steady. Hands trembling on the wheel. The mist grew thinner after a while. The trees opened. The lamppost faded into the distance, and for a heartbeat, I thought I was free. Then the road curved, and the light returned, still flickering, still swaying in the same slow rhythm. I pulled over this time, turned the engine off, waited. The silence was complete. Even the hum had stopped, but beneath that quiet, deep under it, I felt it. The same pull, the same unseen eyes. The faint, patient watching that had followed me through every mile. When I finally stepped out, the mist swallowed me whole. The cold air felt almost alive, curling against my skin, settling on my eyelashes. The road behind me was gone. So was the car. Only the lamppost remained, flickering softly, alone, and in the glass of its light, for just a second, I thought I saw myself, walking toward it, from the other side. The ridge was quiet before the storm came, too quiet. I'd been posted there for 3 nights straight, a narrow line of pines, wet air that carried the smell of rain and iron. It was supposed to be a routine check. Wind warnings, tree fall reports. Nothing unusual. But that night, the world felt hollow, like something had taken a deep breath and never let it out. I remember standing near the edge, watching the sky turn from gray to black. Lightning flashed, but there was no thunder. Just silence. I lifted my radio, tried calling base. Only static answered, not the usual kind. This had rhythm, a low, pulsing hum that almost seemed to match my heartbeat. I turned the dial. The static followed. For a second, I thought I heard my own name break through it, soft, drawn out, like someone whispering from underwater. I froze. The wind stopped moving. The trees leaned forward, their needles trembling without sound. Then, lightning again. For that brief flash, I saw shapes in the valley below. Not people, not quite shadows either. They were tall, thin, moving in patterns that made no sense. When the light faded, they were gone. I waited for thunder, but it never came. The storm rolled, closer, but every sound felt swallowed. The wind, the rain, even the static seemed to sink deeper into itself. It pressed against my head, like a pressure building behind my eyes. I tried the radio again. The static crackled once more, but this time there was something underneath it, whispering, dozens of voices, layered, restless, not words, just the rhythm of them. Breathing. I whispered into the receiver. "Who's there?" For a moment it answered back, my own voice, slightly delayed, slightly wrong. I dropped the radio. It hit the mud, but the static didn't stop. It buzzed against the ground like something alive. The air around me grew heavy. Raindrops started to fall, slow, deliberate, each one landing with a sound that felt too loud in the quiet. Lightning flickered again. This time the shapes were closer, just beyond the ridge, between the trees. Their outlines shivered, like heat rising off pavement. Each time I blinked, they changed position. 1 second to the left, then behind a pine, then gone. I could feel them circling, watching. The static climbed higher. A screech now, sharp enough to make my teeth ache. Then it stopped. Everything stopped. No wind, no rain. Just me, standing there in the dark, hearing my own breath bounce off the silence, and somewhere in that stillness, a voice whispered my name again. Not from the radio, from the ridge. It came from where the shapes had been, low, close, like it was standing right beside me. I turned. Nothing. But I could feel it. A warmth against my ear. A breath that didn't belong to me. I took a step back. The fog moved with me. It shifted, as if something inside it mirrored my every motion. For a moment, the air shimmered. I thought I saw a face, thin, pale, flickering between the mist and the static. Its mouth opened. No sound came out, only silence. Then thunder finally broke. It tore through the stillness, and the world came rushing back. Rain hammered the trees. Wind screamed through the branches. When I looked again, the shapes were gone. The radio was quiet, its light flickering weakly. I picked it up, mud dripping from the speaker. Static again, soft this time, almost calm. I turned it off, started down the trail, mud gripping at my boots. The rain blurred everything into gray. Halfway down, I looked back. The ridge was just a shadow through the storm, no shapes, no movement. But for a brief second, I thought I saw the lightning freeze, just long enough to reveal something tall, standing exactly where I had been. Still. Watching. I blinked. It was gone. The rest of the night passed in silence. Even the storm seemed to move around me as if avoiding the ridge. When I reached the cabin, I set the radio on the table. Its light flickered once, then died. I thought it was over, but sometimes when the wind is low and the rain crawls down the windows, I still hear it, that soft hum just beneath the silence. The ridge is calling again. The forest was quiet that night. Too still for midsummer. Even the crickets had gone silent. Just the soft hiss of the wind, moving through the tall grass like a slow breath that never ended. I'd camped deeper in than usual, far from the trail where the air smelled older, damp with pine and soil. The fire was small, just enough to hold the dark back. Each flicker reached for the trees, then retreated again. I liked being alone out there, at least I used to. Sometime after midnight, I noticed it. A figure, standing between the trees. Too still, too straight. At first I thought it was a dead trunk, a shape caught in the firelight, but when I blinked it wasn't where it had been. It had moved, just slightly closer. I felt it before I truly saw it. A presence, like being watched through a mirror you can't quite see yourself in. I told myself it was a trick of the fire. Flames bend the world, stretch it, but the air felt colder now, thinner. I reached for my lantern. Its metal handle was slick with dew. When I turned it on, the light cut through the dark. Pale, trembling, floating over a wall of trees. Nothing. No figure, no movement, just black bark and mist curling at their roots. I almost laughed. Almost. Then I saw it again, further to the right, the same shape. A man, maybe, tall, narrow shoulders, arms that hung too still. He was just standing there, no flashlight, no gear, no sound. I blinked again, and he was closer. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to move, but my body didn't. It was as if the air had turned to glass around me. The fire cracked. Ash spiraled up, and in that faint orange glow I saw his head tilt. Not much. Just a slow, wrong angle, like he was listening. I whispered to myself, "Who are you?" No answer, only the wind brushing the edges of the tent, soft as breath against fabric. When I looked back, he was gone again. The trees looked empty, but I knew they weren't. Every shadow seemed too thick, every branch too still. I stepped toward the fire, trying to keep my breathing quiet. The smoke stung my eyes, but I didn't dare blink. Because when I did, he came closer, every single time. It was like the dark was moving him, not his own feet. Like he belonged to the space between things. The world narrowed to the glow of my fire, and that empty place just beyond it. I wanted to run, but where? The forest stretched for miles. No path, no sound, just that pale lantern light trembling in my hand. I took one step back, and another, then I heard it, rustling. Leaves brushing together, slow and deliberate, as if something was trying to mimic the wind. I turned the lantern toward it, and caught the briefest glimpse of him. Not his face, not fully, just the edge of it. Pale, smooth, unmoving, and eyes that didn't reflect the light. I stumbled back toward the tent, hands shaking so hard the lantern nearly dropped. The world pulsed with silence. The air felt heavy, like it was waiting for me to breathe too loud. Then, a sound, soft, wet, like a bare foot pressing into the earth. Close, right behind the tent wall. I didn't look. I couldn't. I sat there frozen, listening to each slow step circle the fabric. Once, twice, then nothing. The air returned to stillness. Even the trees seemed to relax. I waited until the fire was almost out. Then, slowly, I unzipped the tent. Cold air spilled in, heavy with mist. No one was there. The ground was untouched. No prints, no movement, only the smell of smoke and the faint hum of insects waking again. I stayed awake until dawn watching the tree line. It looked normal now, ordinary, but sometimes in the corner of my eye, I'd catch a shape that didn't quite belong. Still, patient, waiting. When the sun finally rose, I packed up fast. Didn't even bother dousing the coals. The forest felt different in daylight. Smaller, almost safe. But as I hiked out, I kept glancing behind me. The trees were empty. But it felt like one of them was breathing. And when I blinked just once, I thought I saw him again, standing at the edge of the clearing watching me leave. Still. Silent. Closer than before. It was late winter, the kind where the air feels too still to breathe, too quiet to trust. I was hiking alone, somewhere deep in the northern woods. The sky was the color of ash, flat and heavy above the trees. Snow clung to every branch, every shadow. Even the ground seemed to hum beneath the frost. A faint, hollow sound, like glass under pressure. I'd been walking for hours, following a narrow trail that curled through the pines. The cold bit through my gloves, settling into my bones. Then I saw it. The path ahead, frozen over completely. Not just snow, ice, a long ribbon of white-blue glass stretching between the trees. It shimmered faintly like something alive. I stopped. My breath hung in the air, twisting into fog. The frost had strange patterns in it, swirls, almost symbols. Too even to be random. When I crouched to look closer, I saw them, footprints, pressed deep into the ice, bare, human. They led forward, then vanished halfway down the trail, as if whoever made them had simply stopped existing. I stared for a long time, waiting for my mind to make sense of it. It didn't. The forest around me was silent. Even the wind refused to move. I took a slow step forward. The ice cracked beneath me, a soft sound that echoed too far. Every part of me wanted to turn back, but something in that frost felt like it was calling. The patterns were faint, but they seemed to shift when I moved. Like they were following my shadow. A thin mist rose around my feet. The air turned colder. Colder than it should have been, and then I felt it. A gaze. It pressed into the back of my neck, sharp as the cold itself. The kind of feeling that sinks deep, that tells you you're not alone. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Somewhere behind me, the ice groaned, slow, deep, like something heavy was stepping onto it. I turned. Nothing. Just the trees, tall, unmoving, their shadows long against the pale glow. But the footprints were different now. There were more of them, a second set, smaller, closer to mine. My mouth went dry. I could almost hear the silence, thick, like static in my ears. The trail ahead seemed endless. But going back felt worse. I started walking. Each step cracked beneath me, a thin sound swallowed by fog. The air around me shimmered faintly, and for a moment I thought I saw something move inside the ice. A reflection, or maybe a shadow. It moved when I didn't. It stood when I stopped. My pulse slowed. Every beat echoed through the quiet. I whispered into the air. "Is someone there?" The fog shifted. No answer. But I could feel it. Something breathing beside me, just out of sight. The cold crawled up my legs, biting, burning. My fingers went numb. When I looked down again, the frost had changed. The symbols were clearer now. Lines curling into circles. Circles forming eyes, dozens of them staring up through the ice. I stumbled back. But the ground beneath me gave way slightly. A soft crack. A slow sink. Beneath the clear layer of ice, something moved. Just for a moment. A pale shape. Human-like. Frozen, but shifting. Like it was trying to reach the surface. My breath caught. It looked like me. I don't remember running. I just remember the trees spinning, the frost breaking, the trail looping back on itself. Every direction looked the same. Every step felt colder, and then a whisper, faint behind me. Not in the air, but in the ice. It said my name. Slow. Drawn out. Almost gentle. I stopped moving. The footprints ahead weren't mine anymore. They led forward into the fog, deep and steady. Like someone was walking just ahead of me. But the frost behind me was smooth, untouched. I stood there until the cold blurred my vision. Until even my thoughts began to slow. Then, through the mist, I saw a figure. Still. Facing away. They looked exactly like me, every shape, every line, every detail frozen into place. And as I stared, they turned their head, just slightly, enough to see their breath curl into the cold. Mine didn't. That's when I understood the footprints weren't leading me forward. They were leading me back, to where I'd already been. The frost didn't just cover the trail. It remembered it. And me. I was only another pattern now, pressed into the ice, waiting, listening, for the next set of steps to follow. It was past midnight, the kind of quiet that hums inside your chest. Cold, wide stretches of road winding through fog so thick it looked alive. I was driving home, alone, half lost between mountain turns and low clouds that swallowed everything. The headlights didn't reach far. They just spilled a pale cone ahead of me, floating through mist, catching flakes of water that glittered like dust. The air was still. Even the trees looked frozen in place, thin silhouettes behind curtains of gray. Then I saw it, a soft orange glow. Hovering ahead just above the road, it wasn't bright, not harsh, more like the pulse of a candle behind a curtain. It flickered once, twice, then steadied, a slow rhythm, breathing. At first, I thought it was a street light, but there were no poles, no wires, no shape at all, just that glow. Suspended. I slowed down. The car hummed quietly beneath me. The light seemed to draw closer, or maybe I was drifting toward it without meaning to. I could feel my pulse sinking with it. The way it brightened, then dimmed, like it was alive, measuring time by its own heartbeat. The fog wrapped tighter around the car. The air pressed in, muted, thick. I rolled down the window. Cold mist poured in, touching my face, smelling faintly like metal and rain. The light flickered again. Closer now, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't reflecting. It wasn't bouncing off the fog. It was inside it, like the fog was carrying it, holding it. I pulled over. The car settled into silence, the headlights cutting thin blades through the mist. The glow hovered just beyond the reach of the beams. Still pulsing, still breathing. I sat there for a while, engine ticking softly, trying to convince myself it was nothing. A trick of light, a car ahead, anything ordinary. But the road was empty, and when I stepped out, it vanished. No fade, no movement. Just gone. The silence that followed was wrong, too still, too complete. Even my footsteps on the wet gravel felt muffled, as if the world had drawn in a breath and forgotten to let it out. I stood in the middle of the road, fog curling around my legs, the smell of cold metal thick in my nose, my eyes searched the dark. Everywhere I looked, the mist seemed to shift, rippling faintly, like it was remembering where the light had been. And then, for a moment, I thought I heard something. Not a sound, a pressure, a vibration against the skin, low and constant, like a voice humming from far away. It seemed to come from the air itself, I whispered, without meaning to. Hello? The fog shivered, and there it was again, the glow, briefly. But this time, it wasn't in front of me, it was above, high up, floating just behind the treetops. I tilted my head back, and the light brightened, casting faint shapes in the mist, branches bending, fog folding, like something unseen was moving between them. The rhythm returned. Pulse, dim. Pulse, dim. Each flare of orange seemed slower, longer, almost deliberate. I couldn't tell if it was trying to show me something, or watching to see what I'd do. My breath came out in thin bursts, turning white in the air. I whispered again, I see you. And the light dimmed completely. Gone. The silence that followed felt endless, the kind that fills the chest with static. That makes you afraid to move, because you might hear something moving back. I turned toward the car. Every footstep felt heavier, like the air had thickened around me. When I opened the door, the dome light flickered once, a faint orange glow, then died. I sat there, hands gripping the wheel, eyes locked on the road ahead. Fog pressed against the windshield, veins of condensation tracing shapes that looked almost like faces. I started the car. The headlights pushed forward. But the light didn't return. Only the endless white. Only the quiet. Miles later, when I reached the highway, I looked up into the rearview mirror for a second. Just one. The reflection behind me wasn't dark. It glowed. A soft, orange shimmer pulsing faintly in the fog that trailed behind the car. I blinked. It was gone, but sometimes, on nights when the mist is thick and the road is empty, I still feel that same rhythm. Slow, steady breathing, somewhere just behind me, waiting to be seen. Again, the forest changed after sunset. Everything that felt alive in daylight turned still, even. The air seemed to hold its breath. Had set up camp near the edge of the trees. Close enough to the path, but far enough that no headlights would reach me. The fire had burned low, just embers now, glowing faintly in the dirt. The air was dry, no wind at all. Not even a whisper through the leaves. I could hear my own breathing, soft, uneven, and then a rustle high above. It was faint, like something brushing across the branches. I froze, thinking maybe it was just a bird settling for the night. But it didn't stop. The rustling moved, slowly, from one side of the clearing to the other, leaves shifting, branches swaying. Though the air was completely still, I looked up. The canopy was thick, woven together by limbs that disappeared into shadow. The little light from my fire couldn't reach that high. I waited, listening. It came again. A slow drag, then a snap, like weight pressing down where it shouldn't. Something was up there. The sound crept along the branches, a steady, unhurried movement as though it knew I was listening. I whispered to myself, "There's no wind." The words barely made it out of my mouth. They felt too loud in the stillness. The forest didn't answer. It just listened back. The next branch groaned. A low, splintering creak that sent a tremor through the air. My skin prickled. The hair on my arms stood up. Whatever was moving up there was heavy. The rustling stopped. Silence, thick and waiting. Then a twig snapped, closer this time. Right above where I sat. I didn't move. The embers pulsed orange and dim, throwing thin shadows across the ground. I tried to look up again, but the darkness between the branches was too deep. All I could see was the faint sway of leaves that shouldn't have been moving at all. I held my breath, listening for anything, a breath, a flutter, A shape. The forest gave me nothing, just the slow drip of sap from a nearby pine, the soft crackle of dying firewood, and that strange, unseen rustling, high, slow, circling. It felt like pacing, like something was moving in loops above me, testing each branch, waiting for one that could hold its weight. I reached for my flashlight. The beam cut through the clearing, white and thin, illuminating trunks that rose like pillars into the dark. When I aimed it up, the noise stopped again. No movement, no rustle, just the hollow silence of something pretending to be still. I waited for my eyes to adjust, but the light dissolved into the fog gathering above the trees. It was too quiet now. Too exact, even the crickets had gone silent. Then, a soft thud. Behind me, I spun, but the clearing was empty. Just mist, glowing faintly in the fading firelight. My flashlight flickered once, and in that pulse of darkness, I heard it again, rustling. But lower now, closer. Something brushing the trunks, sliding down bark like claws dragging through moss, then quiet. I could feel it before I could see it. A presence, weight pressing through the air, every breath colder than the last. The forest felt alive again, but wrong, tense, listening with me. Another branch snapped, the sound sharp, wet. Not like wood breaking, like something soft caught in the split. I took one step back, then another. The ground was soft with pine needles, damp and muffling. Each step disappeared into silence. I turned off the flashlight. The dark swallowed me whole. For a long time there was nothing, just that still, frozen quiet. And then, one last movement, a slow shift above me, like something crawling away, dragging through the leaves. The forest sighed. Branches relaxed. The tension drained into the night. It was gone. I stood there until my legs trembled, until the fire went black. When I finally lay down, I didn't close my eyes. I listened to the emptiness, to the soft pulse of my heart against the ground, to the faint, distant rustling that might have just been wind, or maybe it never left. Sometimes, even now, I'll hear it again when I'm near the trees. No breeze. No movement, just that quiet, steady rustling high above, where the light never reaches. The air was colder near the cliffs. Salt drifted up from the sea below, mixing with the sharp scent of stone and moss. My tent was small, barely holding against the steady push of the wind. But the sky was clear, and that was all I needed. I came here for the stars, for the stillness, for the kind of silence that only the edge of the world could offer. The camera hung heavy around my neck, metal chilled against my skin. Every few minutes I'd lift it, breathe slow, and press the shutter. Click. The ocean swallowed the sound whole. When I looked through the lens again, something caught my eye. Far along the opposite ridge, between two broken pines, a figure, pale, still. It stood just beyond the line of the fog, watching the sea. Or maybe watching me. I blinked once, and it blinked back. I froze, finger resting on the shutter. The camera trembled slightly in my hands. When I raised it again, the figure was gone. Only fog rolling gentle through the dark. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the eyes. Light bending on the mist, but the feeling lingered. A weight between my shoulders. That quiet pressure of being seen. I turned off the lamp, letting the night swallow everything but the stars. The cliffs hummed with soft wind. The tent flapped. The sea whispered below, endless and cold. Then, a flicker, not of light, of movement. My breath caught. Across the ridge, the figure stood again. Closer now. Too close. I could almost make out its outline. Long arms, still face. No color. Just a pale shape against the dark. It didn't move. Didn't breathe. But I knew it was there. The camera strap dug into my neck as I lifted it again. Focus. Steady. I framed the shot, through the lens. Nothing. The ridge was empty. My heart thudded once, then slowed. I lowered the camera, and the figure stood there again, right where I'd seen it before. I didn't move for a long time. The wind picked up. Dry grass brushed against my legs. The air smelled faintly of iron and salt. Every sound felt sharper, too close, too deliberate. I took a step back toward the tent. The ridge blurred in the fog, and the figure faded with it. Gone. But the feeling stayed. That strange pulse behind me. The weight of unseen eyes. I zipped the tent shut, though the fabric felt thinner than ever. Every shift of the wind made it tremble. Every small noise outside felt like breath. When I closed my eyes, I saw that blink again, that impossible moment of connection, as if something out there had learned to mimic me. I stayed awake until dawn, and when I finally stepped outside, the ridge was empty. The fog burned off by sunlight, but the lens on my camera was fogged from the inside, as if something had breathed across it. I wiped it clean, but a faint smear remained, a small pale fingerprint right where my eye would meet the glass. Sometimes now, when I take a photo, the same mark appears, a smudge, a shape, a reminder that somewhere, beyond the frame, it's still watching, waiting for me to blink. The trail curved along the mountain's edge, thin air. Dry wind, stone crunching under my boots. I'd started the hike before sunset, but the light faded faster up here. By the time I reached the ridgeline, the world had already turned to ash blue and gray. The silence felt thick, too complete, like the mountain itself was listening. When I stopped to drink, I noticed it, a glow, faint, white, floating a few feet above the ground behind me. I thought at first it was my flashlight reflecting off something, a marker, a trick of mist. But when I turned the beam away, the glow stayed, soft, slow, pulsing like a heartbeat. I stood there for a while, watching it through the cold. Every time I took a step, it followed, hovering just far enough to keep its distance, but never far enough to fade. My breath fogged the air. The wind carried the scent of snow, and still, the light moved when I did. I told myself to keep walking. Don't run! Don't show it that you noticed, but I could feel it, behind me, drifting through the fog as if it were alive. When I stopped again, it stopped too. No sound, no hum, just the soft glow floating in the mist like a slow exhale that never ended. I whispered, "Who's there?" The wind didn't carry the words. They just fell flat into the dark. The light dimmed, then brightened, once, twice, a rhythm, almost like breathing. I stepped backward, and it matched me. My heartbeat slowed, heavier now, filling the quiet. When I turned suddenly, the light darted behind a cluster of rocks, silent, instant. My throat went dry. I waited. Minutes passed. Only the distant creak of branches somewhere below the ridge. Then the glow returned. Closer this time, paler. It moved like mist curling around stone, not walking, not floating, just existing. I started down the trail, each step crunching through frost. The glow followed, never touching the ground, never falling behind. The path narrowed between high cliffs. I could feel cold air leaking through the rock, like breath from something sleeping beneath, and in the reflection of my watch face, I saw it. The light was right behind me now, close enough to cast a faint shadow in front of me. I turned, but it vanished. The darkness that followed felt too deep, like it had weight. The quiet pressed into my ears, into my lungs, then a flicker, overhead, to the side, behind. The light moved again, but this time there were two, one dimmer than the other, weaving slowly through the fog like eyes adjusting to the dark. I froze. Every instinct told me to run, but the mountain was narrow, and my legs felt heavy. When I finally forced myself to move, the lights followed again, not chasing, just keeping pace, step for step. The mist thinned ahead. The trail opened into a small clearing. Cold air brushed against my face. It smelled faintly of rain and static. I turned one last time. The lights hovered at the edge of the fog side by side, still pulsing, still breathing, and then, together, they dimmed once, twice. Gone. I waited, eyes burning against the dark, until the cold finally made me move again. By the time I reached my car, the horizon was pale with dawn. The world felt empty, but not silent. As I started the engine, my rearview mirror caught a flicker of white. Far down the road, two faint glows hovering in the mist, matching the slow rhythm of my breath. I drove until they disappeared. But sometimes, when the road is empty and the fog begins to rise, I still see a light following behind me. Not chasing. Not threatening, just waiting for me to stop. I reached the grove just before dusk. The forest around me had been silent for miles. But here, the air changed. It felt thicker, still. As if the trees were holding their breath. The grove wasn't marked on my map. Just a low dip in the earth where the trunks bent inward, curving like ribs around a hollow heart. I stepped through the first arch of branches. The air cooled instantly. Moisture gathered on my skin, the faint scent of rot and rain clinging to the leaves. The ground was soft. Moss spread in uneven patches, dark with water that never seemed to dry. Each step sank slightly. Quiet. Too quiet. I paused to listen. No birds, no wind. Even the air itself felt heavier, as if sound didn't want to live here. Then I heard it. A whisper. Low. Sliding through the leaves like breath against glass. I turned. But the trees behind me had shifted. Their shapes weren't the same anymore. Branches curved closer, thicker, as if they had leaned in while I wasn't looking. My throat tightened. I took a slow step back, feeling bark under my palm. It pulsed faintly, warm. I pulled my hand away. For a moment I could swear the grooves in the trunk shuddered, like something beneath the bark had moved. The whisper came again. Not words, just a rhythm, rising and falling. The grove seemed to breathe with it. Leaves rustled without wind. Roots twisted under the soil, and from deep within the hollow, a faint shimmer of movement. Shadows, gathered together, clinging to each other in the pale dusk light. I took another step. The air grew colder. Each breath burned against my throat. It felt like walking underwater. Slow, heavy, the weight of unseen eyes pressing against my skin. The shadows moved again. Not closer, but around. Circling the edges of the grove, keeping just within the tree line. Their motion had rhythm, a slow spiral, swaying in unison with the leaves above. The forest was moving. Not alive, just aware. I tried to speak, but the air was too thick. My voice wouldn't carry. The whisper returned, closer now, woven into the rustle of the branches, and for the first time it sounded like words, faint, broken, repeating the same soft syllable. A name. Maybe mine. The trees leaned closer still, their trunks bending so far they creaked. I could smell sap, sweet and sharp, leaking from long cracks in the bark. Each drop landed with a slow tap, like a heartbeat. I wanted to leave, but every direction looked the same. The way out, gone. The grove had folded around itself. The whisper grew into a low hum, vibrating in the soil, shaking loose flecks of dirt around my boots. Then, silence. The kind of silence that swallows thought. Even my pulse felt distant, muffled under the weight of it. In that stillness, I looked up. The canopy wasn't dark anymore. The leaves had turned a dull gray, like ash, and between them a faint shimmer of light, pale, thin, almost metallic. It slid through the branches like water finding cracks in stone. When it touched the ground, the shadows scattered. Not running, just dissolving into the roots as if drawn home. The hum faded. The air lightened. For a long time, I just stood there, afraid to move. Then I took one slow step backward and another. The trees didn't move this time. They simply watched. When I finally crossed the threshold of the grove, the forest sound returned. A faint breeze, a distant crow, the rustle of branches too high to see. I turned once more to look. The grove stood still, empty. But the trunks, they leaned inward again, barely. As if closing behind me, I walked until I couldn't see it anymore. And still I felt that breath, that slow rhythm pressing against the back of my neck. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the whisper of leaves saying my name, soft, patient, like it's waiting for me to come back. The mist came without warning. One moment, the forest was open, light filtering through the canopy, dew still clinging to the grass. The next, everything was gray, soft, soundless. I should have turned back. But the trail was faint, barely a path anymore. And something about the silence. It pulled me forward. The air smelled damp, almost metallic. Each breath chilled my throat. My footsteps were the only noise. Crushed leaves, wet soil, a rhythm that kept me company until it didn't, because after a while the rhythm changed. A half-second delay. Like someone walking just behind me, matching my pace but never quite in sync. I froze. The echo froze too. The mist thickened, curling between the trees like smoke. I waited, listening. There it was, a murmur. Low, threading through the fog, not wind, not water. Voices, familiar ones. I stepped closer to the sound, my heart beat soft in my ears. The mist parted just enough to show the faint outline of a tree ahead, its bark pale as bone, and the murmurs grew clearer. One voice said my name. Not loud, not kind. Just steady, like someone testing the shape of it after a long time. I whispered back. But my voice came out rough, smothered by the air. The forest held still, waiting. Another voice joined in. Then another, all of them familiar. They spoke softly as if through water. Words stretched thin like echoes from a place too far away to reach. Each one was someone I'd lost. My mother. My brother. A friend I hadn't thought about in years. All of them calling, fading in and out, woven into the fog. My chest ached. The air pressed heavier, like grief given form. I followed their whispers deeper. Step by step, the forest changed as I walked. The ground slick with unseen moisture. Branches above bent closer, their tips brushing my shoulders like fingertips. Every few paces I caught a glimpse of something pale, a movement between the trees. Gone before I could focus, the mist breathed around me, warm in some places, cold in others. It felt alive, aware. The murmurs shifted again, their tone no longer familiar, but pleading. Telling me to come closer. I didn't know if it was them speaking or something wearing their voices. I reached an open space, a hollow in the forest. The fog there was dense, spinning slowly in a circle, like it had a center. Every instinct told me to stop. But my feet didn't listen. The air vibrated softly. A hum, too low to hear, only felt. Then through that hum, a single voice rose. It said my name again. Perfectly this time, like a memory that had never left. I felt something behind me. A shift, a presence, the faint warmth of breath against my neck. When I turned, there was nothing. Only mist. But the fog rippled, as if something had just stepped back into it. I took a step away. The circle of fog pulsed once, then went still. All the murmurs stopped. Every single one, and in that silence I could hear my own breathing, uneven, too loud. Then, a whisper again. Right by my ear, "Stay." It wasn't a voice I recognized. It was smaller, thinner, like the forest itself had decided to speak. My chest tightened. The fog pressed closer. I turned and ran. Branches tore at my jacket. Roots pulled at my boots. The air was thick, every breath dragging frost into my lungs. But I didn't stop until I saw the edge of the mist. It ended suddenly, as if sliced in half. A clean wall of air, sharp and dry beyond it. I stepped through, and the sounds of the forest returned all at once. Wind in the branches, birds calling far off, the steady hum of the world. Behind me, the mist stayed where it was, unmoving, dense, like a living thing that had paused. I waited, watching the pale edge of it. Nothing followed, but as I turned to leave, I heard one last murmur, quiet, fading into the gray. It wasn't my name this time. It was a sentence. You shouldn't have left. The mist pulsed once, then thinned into the trees, swallowed by sunlight. And I was alone again. At least, that's what I keep telling myself when the fog rolls in at night. And the air grows still, as if waiting for me to listen. The forest had been kind that morning. Clear sky, dry leaves underfoot, a thin breeze that smelled of pine and cold earth. The kind of quiet that feels earned, soft, steady, safe. But safety doesn't last long in places like this. I was halfway along the ridge trail when I noticed it. The path behind me was gone. At first I thought I'd turned wrong, that the trees had blurred together in my mind. But when I looked back, there was only forest, thick, endless, no footprints, no sign of the track I'd been following for hours. I stood still for a long time, listening. No birds, no wind. Just that strange kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. The forest smelled different now, damp and heavy, like old wood left to rot. I turned forward again, hoping the way ahead would make sense, but the trail seemed narrower than before. The trees closer, their trunks leaning in just slightly. The air pressed colder against my skin. Every step felt wrong, like I was walking in circles I couldn't see. I glanced back again. Still no path. Only shadows where sunlight had been a moment ago. I whispered to myself. Something small, just to hear a voice that wasn't the forest's. It didn't help, because when I stopped talking, I realized the forest hadn't been still after all. Somewhere deeper in the trees. A faint creak. A shift, like wood bending under weight. Then a low, slow scrape. I turned in a full circle. Nothing moved. But the shapes between the trunks. They weren't where they had been. A branch that had hung low now pointed toward me. A rock I'd stepped over was gone. The forest was rearranging itself, quietly, patiently. The panic came soft at first. Then sharper, I walked faster, pushed through low brush, hoping to find some break in the pattern. A clearing, a sound, anything familiar. But everything looked the same. I stopped and marked a tree with my knife. A thin line across its bark, a promise of direction. I walked another 20 paces, then turned back. The mark was gone. In its place, a fresh patch of bark, smooth, untouched. I felt the ground shift slightly beneath my feet. Just enough to make me stumble, and then I heard it. A faint rhythm, almost like footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Not mine. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just started walking faster again, whispering the same words under my breath. Keep moving. Keep moving. The trees leaned closer, branches grazing my shoulders. Leaves brushed my hair, dry and whispering. It felt like the forest was breathing. In, out, around me. Each time I blinked, the world seemed to tilt. The light shifted direction. The path curved somewhere unseen. I stopped running only when I saw the clearing. Or what I thought was one, it wasn't open, just wider, still covered in the same pale mist that never fully burned away. At the center, a ring of stones, old, covered in moss. I stepped into the circle. The air there was stiller, denser. The ground pulsed softly beneath my boots, as if something below was breathing too. I looked around. Every tree at the edge of the clearing was facing inward, their trunks bent slightly toward me. Their roots stretching just under the surface, and in the space between them, nothing. Not even depth. Just a gray wall like distance had been erased. The forest had closed in. I tried to retrace my steps, but wherever I turned, the trees stayed the same. No direction existed anymore. It wasn't a maze. It was a trap. The wind rose, soft at first, then sharper, whispering through the leaves in words I couldn't understand. I pressed my hands to my ears. But even through that, I could hear it. A low murmur, almost human, repeating steady, calm, stay on the path. But there was no path anymore. I ran again. I don't remember how long. Only the rhythm of my breath and the feeling that the forest moved with me, sliding silently under my feet, closing each trail as I passed, until suddenly, there it was, the edge, a break in the trees, a slice of sunlight through the mist. I stepped toward it, and just like that, the ground leveled. The air cleared. The trail reappeared, stretching behind me as if it had always been there, perfectly normal, untouched. I didn't look back. Not once. But later, when I reached the base of the ridge, I turned for one last glance, and deep within the trees, where the forest bent away from the light, I saw movement. The trunks shifted. The shadows rearranged themselves, and for a moment the forest looked almost satisfied, like it had been watching me, learning me, letting me go, only because it wanted to. The dawn came quiet. No birds, no wind, just a still, cold breath that settled over the mountains like ash. I had been walking since before sunrise, my boots dragging through loose gravel, the air dry enough to sting my throat. The sky was turning gray, not bright, just less dark, and that's when I saw it, a pale glow spreading softly across the rocks ahead. Not white, not yellow, something in between, like moonlight caught in mist. It pulsed once, slowly, then faded, leaving behind the color of stone and frost. I thought it was sunlight breaking through the ridge, but there were no clouds and no sun yet. When I blinked, the light returned, closer, brighter. It shimmered across the jagged faces of the rocks, gliding along the cracks and edges, like it was searching for something. I could feel it before I could see it clearly, a warmth, soft and steady, curling around the cold air. Each breath I took hung visible for a moment, then drifted sideways, as if pulled by something unseen. I took another step forward. Gravel crunched beneath me. The glow rippled as though it heard. It reminded me of water, fluid, alive, but too still to be real. The rocks ahead began to gleam. Their shadows bent oddly, stretched in directions that didn't match the light. It was subtle, the kind of wrongness that whispers instead of screams. I crouched down, watching the glow slide over the rough surface. It climbed upward, like something breathing through the stone, and then it moved toward me. Not fast, just slow enough that I could watch it happen. Each time the light passed over a rock, the shape seemed to shift. Edges rounded, cracks smoothed. Like the mountain was softening under its touch, I stepped back. The glow stopped. The air was heavier now. It pressed against my chest. Every sound felt muted, folded under the weight of that brightness. I whispered to myself, but the sound didn't travel far. It stayed close, like the air swallowed it. When I turned away, the light brightened again, like it didn't want me to leave, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw movement within it, a figure, tall, still, not human but shaped like one, a silhouette pressed into the glow as if the light itself had remembered a body once lost. It pulsed again, once, twice. Each time the rocks below it trembled. Dust rose, silent, weightless. I stumbled backward, boots sliding across loose stone. My shoulder brushed a boulder, and I felt it move, just slightly, like something inside it had shifted to make room. The glow crawled higher, spilling over the cliff face. The rocks stretched. They didn't crack, they bent. Stone shouldn't bend, it did. Slowly, like breathing in reverse, the entire ridge seemed to draw toward the light. And I realized it wasn't just reflecting, it was feeding. The more it touched, the more the shapes distorted, as though it was pulling them into itself. I turned to run. The trail behind me twisted in ways I didn't remember. Each step echoed strangely, a half-beat behind the real sound. The light followed. Not chasing, drifting, it never hurried. It didn't need to. Every time I looked back, it was closer, hovering low, touching stone and shadow alike. I could see my own outline reflected in it now, stretched thin, like my body was being remembered wrong. The ridge curved, and I nearly slipped over the edge. The valley below was hidden in fog. The air smelled like rain that hadn't fallen yet. I pressed against the cold ground, breathing hard. The glow stopped a few paces away. It pulsed once more, a final breath, then faded into the mist. Completely. I waited. Minutes passed, maybe hours. When I finally stood, the rocks were still. No light, no warmth. But where it had been, the stone looked different. Smooth, soft, almost wet, and if I looked long enough, I could see faint impressions, like faces, half-formed, caught mid-expression. The mountain had kept something. I walked on, down the ridge, never looking back again. But sometimes, when the air is thin and the morning quiet, I still feel it. That warmth against my back, like the light never stopped following. It just learned to wait. The road through the valley was empty. Damp earth, muted air. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I had been walking since morning, following a dirt path that cut through thinning trees. It should have felt peaceful. It didn't. The silence wasn't natural. It pressed against me like a thick blanket that wanted to muffle every sound I made. My footsteps were the only rhythm left, soft, uneven. Each one sank slightly into the mud, leaving behind small, perfect prints. For a long time, I thought I was alone, until the stillness changed. It was small, just a shift in the quiet. A faint pressure beside me, like someone walking too close. I stopped. The path stretched ahead, empty. The feeling stopped too. I exhaled, slow and careful, watching the air cloud in front of me. When I took another step, it came back, the weight beside me matching mine. Step for step, breath for breath. At first, I told myself it was in my head, that the echo of my own steps was bouncing back from the trees. But the ground was too soft for echoes, and when I shifted my pace, it hesitated, as if deciding whether to follow. The space around me felt smaller now, narrower, like the forest itself was leaning closer to listen. The scent of wet bark filled the air. Something faintly metallic, too. Cold. I brushed my sleeve against my arm, a habit maybe, and froze. It brushed back, just barely. A whisper of pressure against my shoulder, so light it could have been air, but it wasn't. I turned. Nothing. The trees stood motionless, their trunks slick with dew. Pale light dripped between the branches, pooling on the ground like faint silver water. But the feeling stayed. Right beside me, close enough that I could almost sense its shape. A height, a space, a presence. I kept walking, because stopping felt worse. Each step felt heavier, not from exhaustion, from resistance, as if something unseen was pressing softly against me. By midday, the forest opened into a clearing. Mist clung to the ground. I could see my breath again, thin and trembling in the light. I sat on a fallen log, trying to ignore the way the air seemed to move around me. I didn't hear it breathe, but I felt it. That slow rhythm, invisible but constant, like two lungs beside mine. A part of me wanted to speak, to ask it what it wanted, but the words stuck in my throat, cold and heavy. When I finally stood, the feeling moved too. Closer. I started walking faster. The ground crackled underfoot. Dry leaves, frozen twigs, and with every sound I made, it matched me. Perfectly. Not behind. Not ahead. Beside. I couldn't tell where it began or ended. Only that it was there. At one point, the trail curved beside a stream. The water was still, almost glass-like. I looked down. My reflection stood alone. One figure, one shadow. But the surface trembled slightly, as though disturbed by a second breath just out of sight. I backed away, heart slow but loud, the quiet pressing tighter now. I didn't run. Running would have meant acknowledging it. Instead, I whispered, to myself, to the air, I don't know. Please. Stop. The wind moved then, a single soft draft brushing past my neck. It almost felt like an answer. I turned sharply. Nothing again. Just trees, gray and waiting. But the presence shifted. Behind me now. Lingering. Every hair on my arm lifted. The silence deepened, thick and steady, and then it stepped away. I didn't hear it leave, but the pressure lifted. The path felt wide again. I stood there barely breathing until the mist began to thin. When I finally started walking, my body felt light, hollow in a strange, aching way. It was gone. But something stayed behind, a warmth, a trace. Like the air itself remembered where it had been. By the time I reached the edge of the forest, the sun had begun to set. Soft orange bleeding through the branches. I turned back once, just once, to look. The trail was empty. But halfway down, where the mist pooled thickest, I saw it, a faint indentation beside my footprints. Long strides, perfectly matched. I closed my eyes. And when I opened them again, they were gone, all of them, just earth. Untouched, unbroken, but I could still feel it, somewhere behind me, quiet, patient, keeping pace. I don't think it ever left. I think it just learned how to walk without leaving a trace. The sun was falling when I reached the summit, that soft, tired orange that never lasts long. It spread across the rocks in thin streaks, like fading warmth refusing to let go. The pass was empty, just stone and mist curling low along the edges. It felt high enough to touch the clouds, but too quiet for the living. I dropped my pack. The straps were damp. The air was colder up here, thin, almost metallic on my tongue. For a moment I stood still, listening. The world below was gone. No wind, no insects. Just a kind of heavy silence that seemed to breathe around me. It felt aware. The fog began to move then, slowly, like it had weight. It rolled over the ridge, curling around the stones and my legs. I watched it spread, and for a second, it looked like it was avoiding me. Then, a flicker. Far ahead, down the path that curved toward the next valley, something glowed, a light, small, faintly white. It blinked once, like a pulse behind the mist. Then again, I thought it was a reflection. Maybe a headlamp, maybe lightning. But there was no storm, no thunder. No one else? The glow stayed still, and I couldn't stop looking at it. Something about it felt steady, too controlled to be chance. I took a step forward. The fog parted, another flicker. Closer now. The air seemed to hum, not sound exactly, just vibration, running along the skin. My breath felt shallow. The air here didn't want to be breathed. The light pulsed again, then broke apart, as if the fog itself swallowed it whole. Everything went dark. I waited. The silence thickened. Then I heard something faint, like an inhale from the mist itself. And for a split second, I thought I saw shapes within it, tall, still, watching, not moving, but not part of the fog either. I blinked and they were gone. The cold crawled under my jacket. I wrapped my arms tight, trying to feel human again. The path behind me was gone now, just a wall of gray. I didn't remember walking that far, but it felt like the mountain had shifted while I wasn't looking. The glow came back, this time on the other side of the ridge, lower, almost at eye level, and I knew then it wasn't light. Not really. It felt alive. Each pulse lined up with my heartbeat, slower, then faster, then perfectly in sync. I whispered something, though I don't remember what. It might have been please. The glow dimmed. The mist seemed to draw closer again, folding around the stones, the air trembling with its breath. I backed away, careful not to turn my back on it. It followed. Not fast, just steady. When I stopped, it stopped. The hum deepened, as if it were thinking. Then everything went quiet again, utterly quiet. Even the hum inside my ears faded away. And in that moment, the silence felt full, like something was listening, waiting. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, in my throat. The mountain felt heavier somehow, like it had been waiting for me to arrive. A thin current of air brushed past my face. Almost kind, almost human. The glow blinked one last time, just before the mist swallowed it completely, and then nothing, just gray and cold, and a silence that felt older than the rocks themselves. I don't remember how long I stood there. Minutes, maybe hours. Time didn't feel right anymore. When I finally moved, my body felt strange, lighter, emptier, as if something had quietly stepped inside the space I left behind. The fog began to lift as I descended. Slowly at first, then all at once. And as the world below started to take shape again, the trees, the trails, the faint shimmer of water far below. I looked back one last time. The ridge was bathed in pale light, soft like dawn. But it wasn't the sun. It was still there, that glow, hovering quietly above the pass. It didn't move this time, didn't follow. It just watched. The mist curled around it like a living thing, almost protective, almost tender. And in that stillness I felt it, a presence not cruel, not kind, just ancient. And aware, as if it had seen every traveler before me and would see everyone after. By the time I reached the base of the trail, the light was gone. The air felt thin again, but lighter somehow, emptied out. I don't know what it wanted, or if it wanted anything at all. But sometimes when the air turns cold and still, and I catch my breath fogging the dark, I feel it again. That quiet, patient gaze waiting somewhere high above the valley, watching, breathing, listening. And I think maybe I never really left that mountain. Maybe part of me stayed behind in the fog at the pass with whatever waits there when the night finally falls.